Functions and relations. A relation is simply a mapping of inputs to the outputs. The domain is the set of inputs, and the outputs is called the range. Here I have two sets for you. See the input, the domain, the set of inputs, and the output is called the range, which is the set of outputs. The domain is called the independent variable, and the outputs are the dependent variable. The dependent variable depends on the independent variable, on the input independent variable. So a relation can also be written as a set of ordered pairs. And here we have a relation here in set form. A particular type of relation is called a function. A function is a relation in which each input maps to one and only one output. The domain of the function is a set of inputs, the independent variable for the function. The range of a function is a set of outputs, the dependent variable for the function. Here we can look at that same relation here as an ordered pair. You can see that the domain, the set of inputs, is 2, 4, 6, and 8. The range is the set of outputs is 3, 5, 7, and 9. So in this particular one example here is this particular relation here, particular mapping, a function. Now if we look at the domain and the range, we see that each input maps to one and only one output. Yes, it is a function. Notice how each element in the domain maps to only one element in the range. So it is a function. Now, is this particular relation a function here? Here we have our domain and our range. But in this case here, notice that the element 6 in the domain maps to two different y's. So we have one input mapping to two different outputs. It's akin to saying a student can't pass the class and fail it at the same time. So in this particular case, this particular relation here is not a function. Notice how 6 in the domain maps to 2 and 3 in the range. Now, is this particular relation here? We have our domain and we have our range. In this particular case, no, it is not a function. Notice how the same input maps to several different outputs in the range. So it is not a function. Now, is this particular relation a function? Notice the domain and the range here. And each input maps to one output. Each particular input in the domain maps to one and only one output. In this particular case here, it is a function. Notice how each element in the domain maps to only one element in the range. This particular type of function has a special name called a constant function, where each input maps to the same output. Graphically, this would be akin to a horizontal line, where you have different x's mapping to the same y. Example 5, is this particular relation a function? Yes, it is a function. Notice that each element in the domain maps to only one element in the range. This is a special type of function called a one-to-one function. A one-to-one function is a function where each input in the domain maps to one output in the range, but when we map it back, it's still one output mapping back to one input, so it's still a function when it maps back. This makes it a one-to-one function. So 0 maps to 0, and it maps back. Okay, 2 maps to 4, and 4 maps back to 2. So it's a one-to-one function. Now, is this particular relation a function? Notice the domain and the range. Notice that each element in the domain maps to only one element in the range. Is this particular relation a function? Yes, it is. Notice that each element in the domain maps to one element in the range. Example 8 here. Is this a function? No, it is not a function. Notice how 3 in the domain maps to, we have the one input mapping to 4 different outputs. To summarize, a relation is simply a mapping of inputs to the outputs. A function is a relation in which each input maps to one and only one output. A constant function is where each input maps to the same output. A one-to-one function is where each input maps to an output and each output maps back to one input. That is a one-to-one function.